Can we forgo using the term heads up? It's very misleading. I've recently been pondering, what makes a classic dish a classic? Is it because somehow everyone's had a version of it, because it's on TV? Or is it because that dish is ubiquitous with our childhoods, where we seem to base our entire food personality as adults with the 12 dishes we had as children? It's probably that. And one of those dishes for me is spaghetti and meatballs. Even I, as a young lad with my Vietnamese immigrant mother, she would sometimes make me some spaghetti and meatballs. Where did she even get the idea from? How did she get the recipe? Did she get a recipe? Was it good spaghetti and meatball? Yeah. To be fair, it was the best spaghetti and meatballs I had up until that point in life. And I'll be honest, I did kind of love it. Even if it wasn't ever optimal or correct, did its job. Because at the end of the day, it's just some long noodles, some ball-shaped meat, and some tomatoes. And in life, those before us walked so we could run. And that's what we're gonna do with this spaghetti and meatball. So first, we're gonna need our meatballs. And these meatballs are gonna have some breadcrumbs in them. They're gonna need to soak for a little bit before we add them to our meat. So that's what we're gonna do first. So I got some panko here. If you wanna use breadcrumbs, or if you wanna process up some stale bread slices you got, you need about half a cup of your breadcrumbs, then half a cup of some milk. Stir that in and then give this some time to let all our milk soak into our breadcrumbs, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. So once we prep our meatballs, should be good by then. And so, in a mixing bowl here, I got about 2 pounds of, I think this is ground pork. I don't know, I found some in the fridge. Now if you want to use ground beef, you can. If you want to use a mixture of beef and pork, or even chicken or turkey, it doesn't have a lot of fat, so be wary of that. But a combination of any sort of ground meat will work. And of course, with all of our universal salt measurements, half a teaspoon of kosher salt per pound. So that'll bring us to 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Then we'll crush 4 garlic cloves. Then we're gonna mince up 1 onion, and you're gonna wanna mince these pretty fine. Get this into. Then we're gonna chop up a fistful of parsley, something where you get about a 1/4 cup. Yeah, that looks like a 1/4 cup, sure. And we're gonna get a teaspoon of dried basil, teaspoon of dried oregano. We'll crack about 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 eggs, and we can see our bread has soaked up all of our milk. We'll add that in. Now you can mix this by hand until it all comes together, or you could use the mixer, because you're lazy like I am. A flat mixer, let it rip. And that should be it. Everything seems to be mixed quite nicely. If you mix your meat for longer, it'll get a little bit chewy. If that's your thing, that's cool. It's all nice and mixed up. Next, we need to make our meat shaped into balls. Now, one place of contention when it comes to meatballs are the size of meatballs. Some people prefer large balls, some people prefer small balls. Whatever you like, that's your preference. I ain't here to judge. But I got this ice cream scooper looking kind of thing. I mean, I guess it is a scooper. We'll use that as a point of reference. About half of that, because this is quite large. You should probably wet your hands. That'll probably help a lot. Alright, so however large or small, regular or irregular shape your balls are, at this point we're gonna put them in the freezer or the fridge. If you're making these well in advance, if you want them in the fridge for at least at the minimum an hour, if you need to make them a little bit quicker, you want to put them in the freezer for at least 20 minutes. What this allows is for the meatballs to firm up, so when we go to transfer and cook them, they don't fall apart. We want our balls nice and tight. So into the freezer they go. Alright, so after being in the freezer for a little bit, our meatballs have firmed up ever so slightly, enough to make sure they don't break apart when we go to cook them. So now we'll go over to the stove and start making our meatballs and our sauce. Using your vessel of choice, again, I really like this guy here. We're going to need to brown our meatballs first. That allows us for a nice crust, for some good flavors, some good textures. And we're going to do that under medium heat, around 450 to 500 degrees. Add a little bit of oil, being careful not to overcrowd. You want to be sure you're not trying to flip these too early. They like to be stuck, but once they form that nice crust, they'll be a lot easier to flip over. That's what we're looking for right there. Get some color on the sides. And once we get a little bit of a crust going, you can pull these off. We don't need to worry about cooking them through. So we're going to do that, finish that in our sauce. And we're just going to go ahead and finish the rest of our meatballs until they're all have a nice crust on them. Alright, so now our meatballs have a nice brown crust on them. We can see that we have a lot of this leftover fat and oil, which is perfect. We're going to get 2 chopped onions. And once our onions get cooked down a bit, they're a little translucent, we're going to crush 4 cloves of garlic. Then we're going to get 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Now while this might seem redundant since we're going to be adding tomatoes later, really brings some depth to the flavor. We're able to kind of extract some of the tomato oils. At least I think that's what's happening. We're going to get a teaspoon of dried oregano and half a teaspoon of pepper flakes. And then after about a minute or so, start to smell our oregano blooming and our red peppers blooming. We'll add about half a cup of water just to deglaze our pot. Then we're going to add 2 cans of tomatoes. And since I'm using cans of diced tomatoes, I'm going to need to blend this. If you're using pureed tomatoes or crushed tomatoes, you don't need to do this, but unless you want chunky tomatoes, which is up to you. And we're going to turn our heat on high and bring this to a boil. Alright, so now once our pot is boiling, we're going to bring this down to a gentle simmer where we're going to add back our meatballs ever so gently. So gentle simmer means you get tiny little bubbles like this. We don't want any big bubbles, we don't want any popping, we don't want anybody to get hurt here. So we're going to let this simmer for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, making sure our meatballs are cooked through, get our sauce to reduce, and making sure to gently stir it every now and then just to make sure everything is sticking and not burning. While we wait for this, is a good time to get our spaghetti going. Now if you're a younger, more ambitious version of me, you could have made your own pasta. Quite easy actually. But in homage to the origins of this dish, I got here the cheapest pack of dry spaghetti I can get, so we're going to stick with that. Now if you got yourself one of these really convenient pasta pots, I highly recommend. But with our dry pasta, we're going to do 7 grams of salt per liter of water. Should give us the optimal amount of salt in our pasta water. It's boiling. Alright, so let's check on our spaghetti. If you like it al dente, if you like it a little tender, that's up to you. Alright, that's good. Now we could pull out our spaghetti, but make sure you're saving your pasta water because we need that starchy pasta water to help mix with our sauce. Alright, so we've been simmering here for about half an hour to make sure that our meatballs are cooked through. We're at 193, 194. As long as we don't get past like way over 200, these basically won't dry out at this temperature. And so now to finish off our sauce, get a good amount of black pepper in. Let's go with half a teaspoon black pepper. And the next 2 things we need to look for is saltiness and sourness. First for our salt, let's taste where this is at. Go with half a teaspoon of kosher salt. Pretty good for me. If you're finding it's a little bit too sour, you could add sugar to balance it out. This depends on what kind of tomatoes you're using, how long you're simmering it for, and it's not that sour, and you don't need to add any sugar, don't. Or if you're Filipino, put as much sugar as you like along with your hot dogs. No hate, I enjoy it too. That's basically it for our sauce, it's that simple. And now to mix it all together. Of course, you could toss all your pasta into our pot here. But to do all that, it's a little much. So we're going to mix these separately, and it'll be easier to consume in single portions. So I'm going to be using a stainless steel pan here. Kind of just want to keep things warm. You don't want to be eating cold spaghetti and meatballs, so we'll warm this up. Alright, so let's get some sauce to start here. I'll grab some of our spaghetti. So a typical guideline you could use, for every 100 grams so of pasta, you use about a tablespoon of pasta water. Seems to be okay. Get a little more sauce here. And we'll go ahead and plate this. Alright, so how are we gonna plate this? I've never been good at making this look pretty. Do you twirl? Are you supposed to use a carving fork? I don't know. We're gonna do our best here. I've seen people do this. No, it's not really doing anything. Wow, that doesn't look very appetizing. But we got our meatballs. Some big boys. We got some chopped parsley, because everything looks better with a little green. And lastly, some Parmigiano Reggiano, because everything tastes better with it and makes it look great too. Alright, simple enough. Let's see how this is. That's pretty good. That's a good meatball. For a hunk of meat, some noodles, very refreshing, very clean tasting. As odd as that sounds. That is good. But is it better than my mom's long-shaped noodle and ball-shaped meat? No, because really, nothing tastes better than nostalgia, even if it's objectively better.